Okay, so question one, why did Manchester University students start this occupation? Um, so the main factor, the main reason why it's taken place is because essentially the university and universities across the entire country have treated students with contempt. They've treated them like a source of profits, and they've treated them just as a source of cash, of money for the university administration, essentially, and operated in a very undemocratic way. When the coronavirus first hit, the universities were saying, we're still going to reopen university accommodation. We're still going to physically reopen our lectures and things like this. They were promising this physical experience, and they were essentially saying this won't be any different to previous years in any fundamental way. So record numbers of students actually applied to go to university. Record numbers made their way into university accommodation, only to find that that laid the basis for a huge spike in infections. More and more students were infected. I think it's past 30,000 infections on university campuses. And in response, what happened was there was a lockdown on the campuses where students were essentially blocked from leaving university halls. That's had a really significant impact on students' mental health. There was the case of a student who tragically took their own life at the University of Manchester, a young man, a 19-year-old student called Finn Kitson. And that became the real catalyst. There were a number of protests that had taken place against the way that they'd been treated by the university. And I'll get on to our demands a little bit later. But fundamentally, what it's been about is the fact that students have been lured into accommodation. They've been lured into living in these halls, these dormitories, and tricked into it, essentially. And now they're being blamed, and they were told, well, it's your fault that you've put yourself at harm's way, when in reality it's just because they've been lied to, and they've been lied to for the sake of the university making a profit. Number two, how did you come together? Well, so essentially what has come together is a rent strike campaign, the University of Manchester rent strike, which I will send you a link to their Instagram page. They have a Twitter page as well, which you can take a look at, along with a few other campaigns, that are fought on, the issue of student safety, students' mental health, the need for free education, and an end to tuition fees, money that you have to pay to get an education. But the main thing has been really the rent strike. And what this was students cancelling their rent payments to say, we're not going to pay rent until you treat us like human beings and not just like a source of cash, just kind of like, like I said before. And really, I guess how it came together is through the anger and frustration that students have been experiencing. And it's not just something that's happening in Manchester either. It's happening on campuses across the entire country. In a city in the south of England called Bristol, there was also a rent strike. In a city called York, there's a strike of a similar kind of like a caliber taking place there. So it is across the whole country, but Manchester became the real centre of it. So yeah. Number three, what are your demands? So just to start off with, obviously, I'm a member of Student Socialist Alternative. And I'm not speaking on behalf of the official rent strike campaign. I'm speaking as a socialist activist and a revolutionary socialist activist who is just supporting the movement, and we're taking a very kind of like active a very active part in supporting it. But what the rent strike demanded was a 40% reduction in the amount of money they have to pay for their rents. And initially, well, actually, I'll talk about that a bit later on with the university administration. But initially, the administration at the uni were, completely dismissive towards that demand. They made out that it was unrealistic, but the students correctly said, no, this is realistic and we are going to fight for this. Now, obviously, in Socialist Alternative, we would, say that ultimately this has to be linked to a struggle, to completely reclaim education, to take education out the hands of the capitalists that dominate it right now and actually run it democratically through elected bodies of students and staff. But that demand was really correct as a way forward and something concrete to fight on. Number 4, how will you proceed to have your demands accepted? So obviously you were made aware of the occupation that has taken place at the University of Manchester. This was an occupation of a tower called the Owens Park Tower, which is a real kind of like centre of the campus, where the university accommodation is. And they occupied it for 2 weeks in total. The occupation has now come to an end, and I'll get into the reasons for that. But that was a big focus of it. A big part of it, where the students, which were occupying this tower, taking it over, were using it as an opportunity to gain attention from the media. They were tweeting about it on a regular basis, and it really became kind of the focus of it. But one thing that I think is recognised more and more, and it's something that Socialist Alternative and Student Socialist Alternative have been putting forward, is the need to kind of up it to mass non-payment of rents. So, the need to base it on knocking on doors at student accommodation, getting as many students signed up to the rent strike as possible. And then when it comes to the next rent payment day, January 29th, there is mass non-payment on a scale that the university will really feel, that will really kind of be affected by. So that's ultimately what it's about. It's about going all out to win this, but also developing links with workers at the university, workers who have their union, the Universities and Colleges Union. And there has been a real effort to link up the fights of university workers and the fights of students, because university workers, they're not being listened to either by the administration of the university. They're facing very bad contracts. They're having very insecure hours, insecure contracts. Pay has declined. There's a huge problem with the gender pay gap. Men earn much more than women in academia and things like this. And I think what is really recognised by a lot of the students is that our struggle is something that's linked in with theirs and vice versa, because it's against the same force. It's against these university managers that have overseen a process of marketization, of the market finding its way into education and education being run along capitalist lines, which is obviously something we would say has to be fought against very strongly. So question 5, what's the attitude of the university administration? So as I said earlier, initially, the managers at the university, and particularly the vice-chancellor, the kind of head of the university, Nancy Rothwell, were very dismissive. And essentially, at first, what they did was they pretended that there wasn't even a campaign taking place. Students were being emailed saying, we don't recognise that a rent strike is happening, which is just an incredibly arrogant thing to say. And they even threatened students with fines, with penalties, for daring to take the step of taking the university on and fighting for these reductions. But then, as the campaign progressed, and this is essentially why the occupation came to an end. As the occupation progressed, more and more pressure was clearly being felt by the university administration. there was an interview which Nancy Rothwell did with the local media where she was essentially saying, I'm having a terrible time. I feel so stressed out. Life has become so difficult for me. And what that proved was the action of students was really making that pressure being felt. And I think that is a real lesson that can be learned by students and workers in Britain, in Turkey, and all over the world, in every corner of the world under capitalism. But what the university then eventually did was, when the occupation was kind of amped up and more pressure was being placed on them, they eventually caved in and said, we will give you a 30% rent reduction. So not the 40, but we'll give you a 30% reduction for the first part of this academic year. So not for the whole academic year. So in that sense, it's not on the level of what the students were demanding, but correctly, it has been seen as a victory, that we fought for this and we actually gained this. But at the same time, the students in the campaigns, in Rent Strike, Safer, 9K for What, those are the names of the different campaigns, have said, we're not going to stop our rent strike. We're still going to do it, and we're going to do it to demand the full reductions that we demanded from the start. So it's very positive that they've accepted it, but they've said, well, we're not going to use that. We're not going to allow you to use this to stop us from fighting our fight and for launching our struggle. So yeah, it'll be very important that going forward, and it will certainly be a struggle that will continue at least up until the end of January. Obviously, it should broaden out, and it should provide real lessons that when you fight, you can win these things, and you can actually win much more than this. You can use this as a real step towards further victories, and ultimately towards a socialist and a democratic education system, rather than the capitalist ripoff we have right now. So question 6, would you like to say anything about your organization? What I would like to say is that we in Socialist Alternative and in Student Socialist Alternative completely stand in solidarity with you and the student movement in Turkey, with fighting, the same kinds of conditions in many ways, because our struggles aren't going to be too far removed. We both live under the same system. And yeah, of course, our struggle against the very rotten government of Boris Johnson, the right-wing government here, will face many similar things to what you'll be facing with the fight against Erdogan. Of course, your right-wing leader over there in Turkey. So yeah, our struggles, we want to link them together, and we want to show solidarity on an international scale, because the fight for socialism and democracy and for democratic socialism is something that is worldwide. It's not something that has to take place in one single country. And actually, for that reason, we have an international organization that Socialist Alternative is linked to, called International Socialist Alternative. We have a group of supporters and members in Turkey as well, who would stand completely with your fight as well. So I will leave that there, and thank you for asking these questions, and for just showing an interest in the struggles taking place at Manchester. And I hope we can keep in touch after that. So thanks, comrades.